The autumn light fell golden across Winter's ranch. Dust motes danced in the air. An old man sat in his rocking chair on the porch. His hands, weathered and scarred, rested on his knees. James Winters was 78 years old. His eyes still held that storm gray color, the color that had once made men step back, the color that had once saved a life. His great-grandson Henry stood beside him. The boy was 12. In his hands he held a photograph. The sepia had faded to the color of weak tea, but the image remained clear. A young woman, an infant in her arms, a tall man beside them, his coat dusted with snow. "Great-grandpa," Henry said. His voice carried that questioning tone boys use when the world puzzles them. "Why is great-grandma standing in a courthouse? Who's this man with her?" James's fingers drummed once on the armrest, a habit from 50 years past, when decisions meant life or death, when hesitation could cost everything. "That's the day I bought your great-grandmother," he said, his voice still strong despite the years. "Or more truthfully, the day I bought back my own honor." Henry's eyes widened. Children in 1924 knew about honor, about duty, about the old ways, but buying a grandmother seemed strange even to a 12-year-old boy. "Sit down, son," James said. "This story's longer than a summer evening, and every word of it's true." The old man's eyes went distant, seeing not the ranch before him, not the cattle in the pastures, not the house his hands had built. He saw snow. He saw a courthouse. He saw a woman's face. Terrified, brave, beautiful. "It was January 1874, James began. "Timber Ridge, Colorado Territory. 50 years ago this winter. I was 28 years old then, young enough to be foolish, old enough to know better. The kind of age when a man makes choices that define his whole life." His hand reached out, touched the photograph Henry held. One finger traced the outline of the woman's face. Her name was Emma Harrison, 24 years old, widow, mother of a 3-month-old baby girl named Lily. And on that day in that courthouse, she was being sold at public auction. Henry gasped. James nodded. "For $15, he continued. The opening bid was $15. Less than a good horse, less than a plow, less than anything a man might need to work land or build a life. $15 for a woman and child." The old man closed his eyes, and the memory took him. The courthouse in Timber Ridge wasn't much to look at. Single story, stone foundation, wood frame painted white, though the paint had long since begun to peel. 20 feet by 40, a potbelly stove in one corner fighting a losing battle against January cold. Windows on both sides. Through them you could see the snow, falling thick, falling heavy, the kind of snow that buried roads, that trapped travelers, that killed the unprepared. Emma Harrison stood on the floor before Judge Blackwell's bench. She held her daughter close. The baby was wrapped in a thin blanket, not warm enough for this weather. Emma's own coat had been sold weeks ago, to buy firewood, to buy food, to buy one more day of survival. The courthouse held maybe 40 people, men mostly, a few women in the back, Mrs. Fletcher the laundress, Mrs. Thornton who owned the boarding house. Their faces showed different things: pity, greed, calculation, contempt. Judge Blackwell was a heavy man, jowls like a bulldog, eyes small and mean behind wire spectacles. He wore a black coat, clean but worn. A man who took pride in appearances, who understood that authority came from presentation as much as position. He read from a paper before him. His voice carried, practiced, a voice used to being heard, used to being obeyed. Lot number 17, one healthy woman, age 24, literate, skilled in household management, one infant girl included. Said infant approximately 3 months of age. Terms are final sale. Purpose is satisfaction of debts owed by the estate of William Harrison, deceased. The words fell like stones into still water. Ripples spread through the crowd. Men shifted their weight, whispered to neighbors, appraised Emma with eyes that stripped away dignity, that saw only property, only potential. Emma's arms tightened around Lily. The baby whimpered, sensing her mother's fear. Children know, even infants, they feel the tension in the arms that hold them. Hear the racing of the heart pressed against their small bodies. Judge Blackwell cleared his throat, a wet, phlegmy sound. "The law is clear on this matter," he continued. Colorado Territorial Code, Section 47, any dependent residing in the household of a deceased debtor, said household having outstanding creditor claims exceeding assets. Said dependent becomes subject to estate liquidation upon intestate death. He looked up, surveyed the room. In plain English, Mrs. Harrison here lived in her father-in-law's house. William Harrison. He died 3 months back. Left debts of $800. No will, no assets worth claiming. His daughter-in-law lived dependent on his charity. That makes her part of the estate, subject to liquidation same as furniture or livestock. Mrs. Fletcher stood up in the back. She was 40, thin, hands red and rough from years of washing other people's laundry. But her spine was straight, her voice clear. "Judge Blackwell," she said, "this can't be legal. You can't sell a human being. We fought a war over this. The law doesn't allow it." The judge's eyes went cold. "The law is quite clear, Mrs. Fletcher. Sit down. Mrs. Harrison is not being sold as property. She's being contracted out to work off the debts of the estate. It's all perfectly legal. I'd advise you not to interfere with legal proceedings." Mrs. Fletcher sat, but her hands clenched into fists. Her husband beside her put a hand on her shoulder, squeezed once, a gesture that said, "I know, I hate this too, but we can't stop it." Judge Blackwell lifted his gavel. "The opening bid is set at $15. Do I have 15, Bo?" Silence held for 3 heartbeats. Then a voice from the middle of the room. 15. Jake Morrison stood. He ran the Silver Bell Saloon. 3 stories. The top 2 rented to women who worked in the profession that polite society didn't name. Jake was 45, thick around the middle, face red from drink, eyes that crawled over Emma like hands. $15, Judge Blackwell repeated. "Do I have 20? 20. Frank Cooper. 60 years old if he was a day. Mine foreman. His wife had died the spring before. He stood with his hat in his hands, turning it round and round, his breathing audible even across the room. The wheeze of a man whose lungs had breathed too much mine dust. 25. The third voice came from the back. A stranger. Thin, well-dressed, expensive coat, eyes like chips of ice. No one in Timber Ridge knew his name. Later they'd learn he worked for Clayton Webb, a creditor from Denver, a man who bought debts for pennies, then collected them for dollars. 30, Jake Morrison called. 35. Frank Cooper responded. 40, said the stranger. The numbers climbed. Emma stood frozen. Her world had narrowed to this moment. This room, these men who saw her as something to be bought, to be owned, to be used. Lily began to cry, a thin wail. Emma bounced her gently, whispered words that meant nothing, sounds of comfort in a situation that held none. $50, Frank Cooper said. His voice gained strength. And the baby won't be no trouble once she's weaned. The words hit Emma like a fist. Once she's weaned, meaning they'd separate them. Take Lily away once she could survive without her mother's milk. Sell her to someone else. Or send her to an orphanage. Either way, Emma would lose her daughter. No. The word tore from Emma's throat before she could stop it. Please. You can't. Judge Blackwell's gavel cracked down. Mrs. Harrison, you have no standing in this proceeding. You will remain silent, or I will have you removed, and the auction will continue without you present. Emma's mouth closed, but her eyes, God, her eyes, they held everything she couldn't say. Terror, desperation, a mother's love that would do anything, endure anything to protect her child. $60, Jake Morrison said. He smiled, yellow teeth. And I'll even let her keep the kid. Got a crib in storage from my sister's youngest. The implication hung in the air. Work at the Silver Bell, keep Lily close. The baby would grow up in rooms above a saloon, would learn young what men paid for, what women sold. Emma's vision darkened at the edges. Her legs trembled. Only the need to hold Lily kept her upright. If she fell, they might take the baby, might claim she was unfit, unable to care for a child. They'd use any excuse. The courthouse door burst open. Snow and wind roared in, a wall of white, a blast of cold that made everyone turn, made 40 pairs of eyes focus on the figure in the doorway. He was tall, over 6 feet, broad-shouldered beneath a sheepskin coat white with fresh powder. His hat was pulled low, but Emma could see dark hair, a strong jaw shadowed with 2 days' stubble, eyes the color of storm clouds. He moved like a man used to hard country, economical. Sure, every step placed with purpose. His right hand rested easy near his belt, where a Colt revolver hung in a worn holster. Across his back, slung on a leather strap, a Winchester Model 1873 rifle. The gun that won the West. 15 rounds, accurate to 300 yards. Auction still going. The stranger's voice cut through the wind, not loud, but it carried. A voice used to being heard across distance, across weather, across the noise of cattle and horses and men. "Close that door," Judge Blackwell barked. "You're letting in the weather." The stranger complied, pushed the door shut with one hand, turned to face the room. His gaze swept across the crowd, paused on Emma and Lily. Something flickered in his eyes. Then he looked to the judge. "I asked if the auction's still open." Judge Blackwell frowned, studied the newcomer, took in the worn boots, the weathered face, the quiet confidence. "It is. And you are, name's James Winters. I have a ranch 20 miles north of here. Heard you were selling off William Harrison's estate." Jake Morrison laughed, a bark of sound. "The estate's gone, friend. We're down to the dregs now, his daughter-in-law and her brat." James Winters' jaw tightened. Just a fraction. Just enough. His eyes cut to Jake Morrison. The look made the saloon keeper shift his weight, step half a pace back. "I heard," James said quietly. "That's why I'm here." Emma's heart hammered. Who was this man? Why would he ride 20 miles through a January blizzard to attend an auction? The snow outside was getting worse. She could hear the wind picking up, howling around the courthouse corners. Anyone out in that weather was risking death. "Current bid is $60, Judge Blackwell said. "From Mr. Morrison. Do you wish to bid?" James Winters stepped forward, shook snow from his shoulders. As he moved closer to the front of the room, Emma could see him more clearly. Weathered skin, lines at the corners of his eyes from sun and wind, hands that had seen hard labor, calluses, scars, but the nails were clean, the fingers long and capable. Not a rich man, but not destitute either. Somewhere in between, a working man, a man who built his life with his own hands. 75, James said. The courthouse erupted in whispers. $75 was serious money. 3 months' wages for a laborer, a down payment on good land, the price of 6 head of cattle. 80, Jake Morrison called. His face had gone red. "And I'll thank you to mind your own business, Winters." James didn't even glance at him. 100. The whispers died. Silence fell like snow. $100. It was unthinkable. No woman was worth that, no matter how skilled, no matter how young or healthy. Frank Cooper tried. His voice shook. 110. 150. Emma's breath caught. Her knees nearly buckled. $150. Half a year's wages. The price of a good team of horses. A fortune to most men in this room. James Winters stood with his hands loose at his sides, his expression calm. But his eyes never left Judge Blackwell's face. Waiting. Patient. A man who'd made his offer and would stand by it. The thin stranger in the expensive coat laughed. Bitter. He shook his head and moved toward the door. "She's not worth 150, he muttered as he passed. Judge Blackwell raised his gavel. "Do I hear 160? Silence. Frank Cooper looked at the floor, shook his head. Jake Morrison's hands clenched, his face purple, but he said nothing. 150, going once. The gavel hovered. Going twice. A pause long enough for Emma to count 3 heartbeats. "Sold to Mr. James Winters for $150. The gavel cracked down. The sound echoed. Final. Binding. James Winters moved to the judge's bench, reached inside his coat, pulled out a leather wallet, old but well-maintained. He counted out bills, real currency. Not scrip, not promises, actual money, green and crisp. Judge Blackwell examined each bill, held them to the light, suspicious by nature, by practice, but the money was good. He nodded. "The sale is concluded and binding. Mrs. Harrison and her infant are remanded to your custody, Mr. Winters. along with all associated debts and obligations. Mrs. Thornton spoke from the corner, the boarding house owner. She wore purple silk, a dress that cost more than Emma's entire wardrobe ever had. Her eyes were hard as river stones. She's got nothing but the clothes on her back and that baby. Everything else was sold to cover her keep. James Winters turned, looked at Mrs. Thornton. The expression on his face made the older woman take a step back. "Ma'am," he said, his voice quiet, deadly quiet. "You just sold a woman and child to pay for 3 months' room and board. If I were you, I'd spend the rest of my days praying for forgiveness, not counting coins." Mrs. Thornton's face went white, then red. She opened her mouth, closed it. No words came. James turned to face Emma fully for the first time. Up close, he was even more imposing. Tall enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Broad-shouldered beneath the heavy coat. But his expression as he looked at her and Lily was nothing like Jake Morrison's leer. Nothing like Frank Cooper's hungry appraisal. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I know you're frightened, but I give you my word. You and your daughter are safe with me." Emma wanted to believe him, desperately, but she'd believed Mrs. Thornton too, and Thomas's father, and the lawyer who'd promised to protect her inheritance. Trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. "I don't have a choice," she whispered. "Do I?" Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition. "No, ma'am, you don't. But I promise you this. Once we're at my ranch, once you've had time to rest and think, we'll talk about what comes next. You'll have choices then." Winters. Jake Morrison's voice was ugly, thick with rage and something else, something darker. James moved so fast, Emma gasped. One moment he was standing still. The next he had Jake Morrison pressed against the wall, one hand fisted in the saloon keeper's collar. "You say one more word about this lady or her daughter," James said, his voice barely above a whisper, somehow more terrifying than a shout. "And I'll make sure you're spitting teeth for a week, understand?" Jake Morrison's eyes bulged. He nodded frantically. James released him, stepped back, adjusted his coat with deliberate calm, turned to Emma. "Sorry, ma'am, but I won't have men speaking about you that way." Emma stared at him. Lily had started to whimper again. Emma realized her own hands were shaking, from cold, from fear, from the sudden violent release of tension. "We should go," James said. "Storm's getting worse. I've got a wagon outside. It's not much, but it's covered, lined with blankets." "I don't have anything to pack," Emma said. The words came out flat, empty. "They took everything." James's expression darkened. Without a word, he shrugged out of his sheepskin coat, draped it around Emma's shoulders. It was huge on her, still warm from his body. It smelled of wood smoke and horse and something else, something clean and safe. "What about you?" she asked. "I've got a heavy shirt, and I'm used to the cold. Come on." He didn't touch her, didn't try to take Lily or grip her arm. He simply turned and walked toward the courthouse door, clearly expecting her to follow. Emma looked back once, at the crowd, at Mrs. Fletcher, whose eyes were bright with tears, at Mrs. Thornton, whose face was twisted with resentment, at Judge Blackwell, who was already shuffling papers for the next piece of business. Then she looked down at Lily. Her daughter's small fist had grabbed the lapel of James Winters' coat, held tight. Emma followed him out into the storm. The cold hit like a fist. Despite the borrowed coat, Emma gasped. Snow drove sideways, already accumulating in drifts against the buildings. Main Street was nearly empty. Only a fool would be out in weather like this, or a desperate man riding to an auction. James led her to a covered wagon, well built. The bed lined with hay and blankets like he'd said. 2 sturdy horses hitched to the front, a third horse tied to the wagon's back. A big gray gelding, strong, well fed despite the winter. "That's Buck," James said, following her gaze. "Best horse I've got. He'll get us home." He helped her up onto the wagon seat, his hands at her waist, brief, careful, respectful. Once she was settled, he pulled a thick buffalo robe from the wagon bed. "Wrap this around you and the baby. It's going to be a cold ride." "How far?" Emma asked, her teeth already chattering. 20 miles, 3 hours if the roads stay clear. Longer if the snow keeps up." He glanced at the sky, slate gray, slate, heavy with more snow to come. We might have to shelter at the Henderson place, halfway point. They're good people. Emma nodded, tucked the buffalo robe around herself and Lily. The baby was blessedly quiet now, perhaps lulled by exhaustion, perhaps by the sudden warmth. James secured Buck to the back of the wagon, swung up onto the gelding with easy grace, the kind of movement that comes from a lifetime on horseback. "Stay close behind me," he called over the wind. "The road's marked with posts, but the snow can hide them. If you get confused or scared, just follow Buck. He knows the way home." Home. The word struck Emma with unexpected force. She had no home. She was traveling into the wilderness with a man she didn't know. A man who'd bought her like a sack of flour, who'd paid $150 for the right to decide her fate. But as James Winters urged Buck forward and the wagon lurched into motion, Emma realized she had no choice but to trust him. At least she thought, gripping the reins with numb fingers. He'd called her ma'am. He'd given her his coat. That was more respect than anyone in Timber Ridge had shown her in 3 months. The town disappeared behind them within minutes. Swallowed by snow and distance, the world narrowed to the rump of Buck ahead, the creak of the wagon, the whistle of wind through the canvas cover. Lily dozed against Emma's chest, her small body a point of warmth beneath the buffalo robe. An hour passed. Emma's hands ached from gripping the reins. Her face was numb despite the coat's high collar. But she kept the horses steady, following Buck's steady pace through the deepening snow. James looked back frequently. Each time he'd raise his hand, a small gesture, reassurance, encouragement. Emma found herself watching for those moments. They were her only anchor in the white void. Another hour. The snow was falling thicker now, the wind driving it into drifts that reached halfway up the wagon wheels. Emma's arms trembled with fatigue. She'd eaten nothing since yesterday morning, a piece of hard bread Mrs. Thornton had thrown at her with contempt. The world began to blur at the edges. "Ma'am," James's voice cut through the wind. He'd stopped a Buck and was riding back toward the wagon, concern written clearly on his weathered face. "Henderson's place is just ahead. We need to stop." Emma tried to answer. Her jaw was too stiff to form words. She managed a nod. James dismounted, came to her side of the wagon. "Can you get down?" She tried. Her legs buckled the moment her feet touched ground. James caught her before she fell, one arm around her waist, the other steadying Lily. "I've got you," he said. "Just hold on." He half-carried her toward a structure that materialized from the snow, a cabin, small but solid, smoke rising from its chimney, light glowing warm in the windows. James pounded on the door. "Henderson, it's James Winters." The door opened, revealing a bearded man in his 50s and a woman with gray-streaked hair. Their eyes widened at the sight of James supporting Emma and the baby. "Lord have mercy," the woman breathed. "Get them inside quickly." The cabin was blissfully warm. Emma felt sensation returning to her face and hands in painful prickles. Mrs. Henderson took Lily from her arms with practiced efficiency. "This baby's half frozen," she scolded. But her hands were gentle as she unwrapped Lily from the buffalo robe. "And you, child, when did you last eat?" "Yesterday," Emma managed through chattering teeth. Mrs. Henderson made a noise of pure disgust. She deposited Lily in her husband's arms. The baby immediately began fussing, but Mr. Henderson held her carefully, rocking slightly. "James Winters," Mrs. Henderson said, bustling toward the stove. "What in heaven's name are you doing with a woman and baby in weather like this?" "Long story," James said. He was rubbing his arms now, trying to warm himself after giving up his coat. "Is there coffee?" "There's stew and bread and coffee enough for an army." Mrs. Henderson pointed at Emma. "Henderson, stop gawking and help this woman to a chair." The next hour passed in a blur of warmth and food and questions. Emma ate mechanically, barely tasting the venison stew or fresh bread. Lily nursed hungrily, then fell into an exhausted sleep in Emma's arms. The Hendersons asked no questions, though their eyes held 100. Finally, when Emma's shivers had subsided and color had returned to her face, Mrs. Henderson spoke. "You can't go on in this weather. You'll freeze to death. The storm's getting worse." Mr. Henderson agreed, peering out the window. "Can't see more than 20 feet. You'd lose the road for sure." James looked at Emma. "They're right. We need to wait it out. Emma nodded, too exhausted to argue, too numb to care. We've got a spare room, Mrs. Henderson said. Small, but private. You and the baby can rest there. Thank you, Emma whispered. Mrs. Henderson led her to a tiny room, barely large enough for a narrow bed and a washstand, but the bed had clean blankets, and the room was warm. Lily was already asleep. Emma laid her daughter down carefully, then sank onto the edge of the mattress. Through the thin walls, she could hear James talking to the Hendersons. Their voices were low, but occasional words carried. Bought her at auction. Judge Blackwell said it was legal. Not right, James. A woman's not property. I know that. Why do you think I bid? Silence, then Mrs. Henderson's voice. Softer now. What are you going to do with her? James's answer came slow, thoughtful. Give her a choice. Once she's rested, once she feels safe, she'll decide what happens next. And if she chooses to leave, a long pause. Emma held her breath, straining to hear. Then I'll give her money and a horse and my blessing. Emma closed her eyes. A choice. He'd said that before, but she'd had choices before too, or so she'd thought. And everyone had led her to that courthouse, to that auction block, to being sold like livestock. She pulled Lily close, let exhaustion pull her under. When she woke, the room was dark, the cabin silent. Disoriented, Emma sat up. Lily slept peacefully beside her, pale moonlight filtered through the small window. The storm had passed. Emma stood on unsteady legs, crept to the door, opened it a crack. The main room was lit by firelight. James Winters sat in a chair near the hearth, staring into the flames. He'd changed into a dry shirt. Mrs. Henderson's doing, probably. His hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked tired and young somehow, without his hat and coat. Maybe 30, maybe less. Too young to have the kind of money he'd spent at that auction. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up. Their eyes met across the dim room. How's the baby? He asked quietly. Sleeping. Good. He gestured to a chair across from him. You should sleep too. Long ride tomorrow. Emma stepped fully into the room, closed the door behind her. She sat, but she didn't feel sleepy anymore. She felt wired, full of questions that had been building since that moment in the courthouse. Why did you do it? She asked. Do what? You know what? $150 for a woman you'd never met, and a baby that's not yours. Why? James was quiet for a long time. His gaze returned to the fire. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, heavy with old pain. My mother died when I was 10. Childbirth. The baby, my sister, only lived 3 days. He paused. My father remarried within the year. Had to. Couldn't run the ranch alone with 3 sons to raise. Her name was Martha. She was a widow herself, had 2 young children of her own. The arrangement was purely practical. Father needed help. Martha needed security. He smiled faintly. But it became more than that. They grew to love each other, and she loved us boys like we were her own. She sounds like a good woman, Emma said softly. She was. The smile faded. When I was 17, my father got thrown from a horse, broke his neck, died instantly. He rubbed his jaw. That's when the trouble started. My father's brother came from back east, Uncle Lawrence. He contested the will, said Martha had no legal claim to the ranch, that it should pass to blood relatives. The judge agreed. James's voice went flat. Martha and her children were turned out with nothing. The ranch I'd worked my whole life that my father had promised would be mine, and my brother's, it went to a man who'd never set foot on the property before. Emma felt her stomach tighten. That's horrible. Martha died that winter, pneumonia. She'd been living in a boarding house in Denver, taking in laundry. He met Emma's eyes. Her children ended up in an orphanage. I tried to get them out, but I was barely 18. No money, no prospects. By the time I'd saved enough to go back for them, they'd been sent east on one of those orphanage trains. I never found them. Emma's throat tightened. I swore that day, James said, that if I ever had the means, I'd never let that happen to another woman. I'd never let someone lose everything just because the law said they had no rights. He leaned back in his chair. So when I heard Judge Blackwell was auctioning off William Harrison's daughter-in-law to pay debts, I rode straight to Timber Ridge. You didn't know me, Emma whispered. Didn't matter. I knew what you were facing. He held her gaze, and I couldn't let it happen. Not again. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Emma's hands were shaking again. But not from cold, from something else, something she couldn't name. What happens now? She asked finally. James stood, moved to the window, looked out at the moonlit snow. Tomorrow we ride to my ranch. It's nothing fancy. A house, a barn, some cattle, chickens. I have two hands who work for me. Brothers named Ben and Sam Carter. Good men. He turned back to her. You and Lily will have your own room. I'll sleep in the barn until we figure out what you want. What I want, James's expression was earnest. I want you to stay. I want Lily to be safe. I want to build something with you. Not because I own you or because you owe me, but because we choose it, both of us. He paused. But only if that's what you want too. Emma looked at him, at this stranger who'd spent a fortune to save her, at this man whose mother and stepmother had both been failed by the men in their lives, at this cowboy standing in a borrowed cabin, promising her choices she didn't believe existed. I want Lily to be safe, she said finally. That's all I have left to want. James nodded slowly. Then that's what you'll have. I promise you, Emma Harrison. As long as you're under my protection, no one will harm your daughter or you. It was the first time he'd used her name. It sounded strange in his voice. Careful, respectful. Why should I trust you? The question came out harsher than she'd intended. James didn't flinch. You shouldn't. Trust has to be earned, and I'm a stranger to you. He paused. But I'll earn it, however long it takes. Emma studied his face in the firelight, looking for deception, for hidden motives, for the catch that surely existed somewhere in this arrangement. But all she saw was a tired man who'd ridden through a blizzard to buy a woman's freedom. Not her specifically, a woman. Any woman in that position. The realization settled over her like a blanket. He hadn't saved her. He'd saved the situation. She was still just a problem to be solved, a debt to his dead stepmother to be repaid. I'll work, she said abruptly, to repay you. I can cook and clean and tend animals. I'll earn my keep. That's not necessary. It is to me. I won't be anyone's charity case. Not yours, not Mrs. Thornton's, not anyone's. If I'm staying at your ranch, I'm working for my place there. James watched her for a long moment, then nodded. All right, if that's what you need. It is. Then we'll work out an arrangement. Fair wages for fair work. I don't need wages. I need security. I need to know that I'm earning my place, that I'm not just taking charity that can be withdrawn the moment you change your mind. James's expression softened slightly. I understand. Emma wrapped her arms around herself. The borrowed nightgown Mrs. Henderson had given her was too large, slipping off one shoulder. She felt exposed, vulnerable, standing in this strange cabin with this strange man who claimed to want nothing from her. I should go back to bed, she said. Yes, ma'am. That word again, ma'am, as if she were a respectable woman instead of property he'd purchased for $150. Emma turned toward the bedroom, then paused. Mr. Winters? Yes. Thank you for what you did today. Whatever your reasons, you saved us. James's mouth quirked, almost a smile. James, just James, and you're welcome, Emma. She closed the door behind her, leaned against it, her heart pounding. In the bed Lily slept on, unaware that her mother's life had just changed course once again. Emma climbed back under the blankets, pulled her daughter close. Through the wall she heard James settle back into his chair, the creak of wood, the whisper of him stoking the fire. Outside the moon cast silver light across the snow. The storm had passed, but the cold remained. Emma closed her eyes, tried to imagine what waited for her at the end of tomorrow's journey. A ranch, a room of her own, a man who promised her choices. It sounded too good to be true. And in Emma's experience, things that sounded too good to be true usually were. But as Lily's small hand curled against her chest and exhaustion pulled her down, Emma made herself a promise. Whatever happened at James Winters' ranch, she would survive it. She would protect her daughter, and she would never ever stand on another auction block again. Even if it meant learning to trust a stranger who'd bought her freedom. Even if it meant believing in second chances she'd stopped believing in months ago. even if it meant hoping just a little that maybe this time would be different. The fire burned low in the main room. James sat watching the flames, unable to sleep. He'd done it. He'd actually gone through with the insane plan that had formed the moment he'd heard about the auction. $150. Half his savings, money he'd been setting aside for breeding stock come spring. Gone. Spent on a woman and baby he didn't know. His foreman Ben was going to think he'd lost his mind. His brother Marcus, working a claim up in Silver Peak, was going to laugh until he cried. And maybe they'd be right. But James couldn't shake the image that had driven him through that blizzard. Martha's face the day Uncle Lawrence had turned them out of the ranch. The helpless rage James had felt as a 17-year-old boy, watching his stepmother and her children forced from their home with nothing. He'd been powerless then. He wasn't powerless now. The memory of Emma Harrison standing on that courthouse floor, holding her baby with desperate strength, while men bit on her like she was livestock. It had filled him with the same rage, the same determination. He'd saved her. That much was done. Now came the hard part, earning her trust, proving he wasn't like the men who'd failed her before, creating a space where she could heal, could decide her own future. James rubbed his eyes. He hadn't thought past the auction, hadn't really planned for what happened after. He'd just known he had to act. Well, he'd acted, and now he had a terrified widow and a 3-month-old baby depending on him. God help me, he muttered to the dying fire. Don't let me fail them. Outside, an owl called through the cold night. The wind had died down, leaving only silence and starlight. Tomorrow they'd reach the ranch. Tomorrow the real work would begin. Tonight James Winters sat vigil in a borrowed cabin and prayed that his impulsive decision to save Emma Harrison wouldn't destroy them both. In the small bedroom, Emma's breathing had evened into sleep. Lily dozed peacefully, her small fist clutching her mother's nightgown. Neither of them heard James add wood to the fire, or saw him settle into the chair for the long, cold watch until dawn. Neither of them knew that tomorrow's journey would be only the beginning of something neither could yet imagine. But in the darkness and the silence between heartbeats, something shifted. A door had opened. A path had appeared. And though neither Emma nor James knew it yet, they'd both just taken the first step toward home. Dawn broke cold and clear. Emma woke to Lily's hungry whimpering and the smell of coffee drifting through the cabin walls. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. Then yesterday crashed back. The auction, James Winters, the storm. She sat up, her body aching from exhaustion and tension. Lily's face was red, her small mouth working in pre-cry frustration. Emma quickly nursed her, grateful for the privacy of the small room. Through the thin walls, she heard voices, James and the Hendersons discussing road conditions. Drifts are deep, but passable, Mr. Henderson was saying. Should make it to your place by midday if you start soon. Appreciate the hospitality, James replied. And the discretion? We won't speak of it. Mrs. Henderson's voice was firm. That poor girl's been through enough without becoming gossip fodder. Emma's throat tightened. She finished feeding Lily and dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes. The only clothes she owned. When she emerged from the bedroom, Mrs. Henderson was packing food into a basket. For the journey, the older woman said, pressing it into Emma's hands. Bread and cheese and some dried apples. The baby looks healthy, but you're too thin, child. Thank you, Emma whispered, for everything. Mrs. Henderson cupped Emma's face with one calloused hand. You listen to me. James Winters is a good man. Knew his stepmother, Martha. She spoke highly of him. He'll treat you right. Her eyes searched Emma's. But if he doesn't, if anything goes wrong, you come back here. Understand this door is always open to you. Emma nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The journey to James's ranch was nothing like the terror-filled flight through the blizzard. The morning sun turned the snow-covered landscape into something beautiful, almost peaceful. James rode ahead on Buck. Emma followed with the wagon, Lily bundled against her chest. The road was clear enough to follow, marked by fence posts and the tracks James's horse left in the fresh powder. They stopped once to rest the horses. James helped Emma down from the wagon seat, his hands careful and brief at her waist. How much farther? Emma asked. 2 hours, maybe less. He looked at the sky, gauging something in the angle of the sun. We'll be there before noon. Emma wanted to ask more about the ranch, about what would be expected of her, about the two hands he'd mentioned. But James had already turned back to Buck. He wasn't cold exactly, but he wasn't warm either, just distant, as if yesterday's conversation by the fire had never happened. Maybe he regretted it, regretted spending that money, regretted the impulse that had driven him to that courthouse. Emma climbed back into the wagon and picked up the reins. She couldn't afford to care about James Winter's regrets. She had to focus on survival, on Lily, on the choices he'd promised her, if those choices were real. The ranch appeared gradually, revealing itself as they crested a low hill. Emma's first thought was that it was smaller than she'd expected. Just a simple house, one story, wood frame with a stone chimney, a large barn, a chicken coop, and a bunkhouse set back from the main building. Cattle dotted the snow-covered pastures. Dark shapes against white. A thin line of smoke rose from the bunkhouse chimney. It wasn't grand, it wasn't even particularly pretty, but it looked solid, permanent, real. Two men emerged from the barn as they approached. Both were young, early 20s, Emma guessed. One tall with dark blonde hair, the other slightly shorter but broader through the shoulders. Brothers. You could see it in the shape of their faces, the way they moved. They stopped dead when they saw the wagon. "Boss!" The taller one's voice carried across the yard. "That's you." "It's me, Ben," James called. He dismounted and led Buck toward the barn. "This is Mrs. Harrison and her daughter Lily. They'll be staying with us." The two men exchanged glances, but neither asked questions. They just stepped forward, pulled their hats off. "Ma'am," the taller one said, "welcome to the Winters Ranch." "I'm Ben Carter," he continued. "This is my brother Sam." Sam nodded, offered a shy smile. "Pleased to have you here, ma'am." Very pleased. It's been all men for too long. Place needs a woman's touch." Emma managed a nod. She felt their curiosity like a physical thing. But neither man pressed. They just helped James unhitch the wagon horses, started hauling gear into the barn with quick efficiency. "I'll show you the house," James said to Emma. The house was cold inside, the hearth empty. James moved immediately to the fireplace, began building a fire with practiced movements. Emma stood just inside the door, holding Lily, not sure where to go or what to do. "Your room is through there." James nodded toward a doorway on the left without looking up from the kindling. "Only bedroom in the house. I've been sleeping out here by the fire, so it's yours now." Emma moved to the doorway, looked in. The room was small but clean. A bed with a quilt, a chest of drawers, a washstand, a window looking out toward the mountains, and in the corner, a wooden cradle. Emma turned to stare at James. "I made that last night," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "After we got back from the Hendersons. Figured the baby needed somewhere safe to sleep." He was back at the fireplace, coaxing the flames higher. "It's rough work, but it'll hold." Emma set Lily in the cradle, ran her fingers over the smooth wood. The joints were tight, the runners even. This wasn't rough work. This was carpentry, careful and skilled. "Thank you," she said. James just nodded, left the room, closing the door behind him. Emma sank onto the bed, put her face in her hands. She was here, at a stranger's ranch in the middle of the Colorado Territory, with no money, no way to leave, dependent on a man who'd bought her at auction, and now wouldn't meet her eyes. Lily began to fuss in the cradle. Emma picked her up, held her close, breathing in the sweet baby smell of her daughter's hair. "We're going to be all right," she whispered. "We have to be." When she emerged from the bedroom, the main room had transformed. The fire blazed in the hearth. James had set a pot of coffee on to boil, was slicing bread at a rough wooden table. Ben and Sam sat on a bench near the fire, their hats in their laps, looking uncertain. "Mrs. Harrison," James said without turning around. "This is Ben and Sam Carter. They've worked for me for 2 years. Good men, both of them." "Ma'am," Ben stood, "we're pleased to have you here." "Very pleased," Sam added quickly. "It's been all men for too long. Place needs a woman's touch." Emma wanted to ask what that meant, but James was already pouring coffee into tin cups. "Sit," he said to Emma, nodding toward the table. "We need to discuss arrangements." Emma sat, Lily in her lap. The three men arrayed themselves around the table, James across from her, Ben and Sam on either side. It felt formal, deliberate. Mrs. Harrison has agreed to work for her keep, James began, his voice businesslike. Cooking, cleaning, tending the chickens, whatever needs doing around the house. That's not necessary, boss, Ben said. We can handle that. It's what she wants, James replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. He turned to Emma. $20 a month plus room and board, standard for a ranch housekeeper. Ben and Sam make 30 each, but they handle livestock and heavy labor. 20 is fair for house management. Emma's breath caught. $20. That was more than most women earn for domestic work. That's too much, she said. It's standard for ranch housekeeping, James replied. Ben and Sam make 30 each, but they handle livestock and heavy labor. 20 is fair for house management. I'm not a housekeeper. I'm a woman with nowhere else to go. James looked at her directly for the first time since the Henderson cabin. You're someone who works for wages, he said quietly. Same as the rest of us, if that's what you want to be. Emma met his eyes. They were steady, unreadable, giving her nothing to react against. All right, she said finally, $20. Good. James turned to Ben and Sam. You two keep to the bunkhouse unless you are invited to the main house. Mrs. Harrison's privacy is to be respected at all times. Understood. Yes, boss, they said in unison. One more thing. James's voice hardened slightly. Anyone in town asks about Mrs. Harrison, you say she's my housekeeper. Nothing more. Her business is her own. Ben and Sam nodded solemnly. Emma felt something loosen in her chest. He was protecting her reputation, or what was left of it. Now get back to work, James said. Those fences in the north pasture won't mend themselves. The two men filed out, pulling their hats low against the cold. When the door closed behind them, James stood, moved to the window, his back to Emma. I need to ride out with them, he said. Check the herd, make sure none got caught in the storm. I'll be back before dark. What should I do? Emma asked. Whatever you want. Rest if you need to. There's food in the pantry, firewood stacked outside. He finally turned to look at her. This is your home now, Emma, at least for as long as you choose to stay. You don't need my permission to exist here. He left before she could respond. Emma sat alone in the quiet house, Lily dozing in her arms, and tried to understand what had just happened. James Winters had bought her freedom, given her work and wages, protected her privacy and reputation, and now he was treating her like a tenant, an employee, a guest who might leave at any moment. She didn't know what to make of him, couldn't figure him out, and that uncertainty was almost worse than the courthouse had been, because at least there she'd known what men wanted from her. James Winters seemed to want nothing at all. Emma spent the afternoon exploring the house. It was sparse but well-maintained. The main room held the fireplace, the table, 2 chairs, and a rocking chair that looked handmade. The kitchen was a corner of the main room, with a cast-iron stove, a pump for water, and shelves lined with supplies. The pantry held flour, cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, and preserves, enough to feed 4 people through a hard winter. In the bedroom, Emma found more surprises. The chest of drawers held men's clothes, James's obviously, but he'd cleared out 2 drawers completely, left them empty for her. Even though she had nothing to put in them, she opened the 3rd drawer, found something that made her throat close up. Baby clothes, tiny gowns and tees, carefully folded, smelling faintly of cedar, old but well preserved. Emma lifted one small gown. The fabric was soft with age, the stitching neat and even. Someone had made these with love. Someone had dressed a baby in these clothes, had held that baby close. Martha, James's stepmother. These must have been her children's clothes, saved all these years. Emma carefully refolded the gown, closed the drawer. She couldn't use them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. They felt too precious, too weighted with someone else's grief. Lily woke hungry. Emma nursed her by the fire, rocking slowly in the handmade chair. The house was warm now, the afternoon sun slanting through the windows. Outside, she could hear cattle lowing, the distant sound of men's voices. This could be peaceful, she thought. This could be a life, if she could trust it, if she could believe it would last. Evening came early in the winter mountains. The sun disappeared behind the peaks. Shadows flooded the valley. Emma had managed to prepare a simple meal, beans and cornbread, nothing fancy, but it was warming on the stove when James returned. He came through the door on a blast of cold air, his face red from wind, snow clinging to his shoulders. He stopped when he saw the table set for two, the food ready. "You didn't have to cook," he said. "You're paying me to keep house," Emma replied. "That includes cooking." James hung his coat and hat by the door, moved to the pump to wash his hands. Emma noticed he moved stiffly, favoring his left side slightly, as if something hurt. "Ben and Sam usually eat in the bunkhouse," he said. "They've got their own setup there." "I made enough for 4, Emma said. "Should I take some out to them?" "They'd appreciate that, but you don't have to wait on them." "I'm not waiting on anyone. I'm earning my wages." Something flickered in James's expression. Approval, maybe, or respect, but it was gone before Emma could be sure. They ate in silence. Emma had never been comfortable with quiet, had always felt compelled to fill it with conversation. But James seemed perfectly content to eat without talking. And Lily was asleep in the cradle, and Emma found she didn't mind the silence as much as she'd expected. "How was the herd?" she asked finally. "Lost 2 calves to the storm," James said, his voice matter of fact. "Found them frozen in a drift. Could have been worse. Rest came through fine." "I'm sorry," he shrugged. "It's the life. You lose stock sometimes." Emma thought about those 2 dead calves, about the money they represented, money James might not have lost if he hadn't spent $150 at an auction. "Are you going to regret it?" The words came out in a rush. "Buying me, spending that money. Are you going to wake up one day and realize you made a terrible mistake?" James set down his fork, looked at her directly for the first time since they'd returned to the ranch. "No," he said, "I won't regret it." "How can you be sure?" "Because I know why I did it. And it wasn't a mistake, it was a choice." He paused. "A choice that cost you half your savings, and 2 calves you might have saved if you'd been here during the storm instead of riding to Timber Ridge." "Maybe," James said, his voice staying level. "Or maybe I'd have lost 4 calves. Or none. There's no way to know." He leaned back in his chair. "But I do know that if I hadn't gone to that courthouse, you and Lily would be somewhere far worse tonight. So no, Emma, I don't regret it." Emma looked down at her plate, unable to hold a steady gaze. "I don't understand you." "You don't have to. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got." James stood, carried his plate to the wash basin. "I'm going to check the animals one more time before bed. Lock the door behind me." He was gone before Emma could respond. She sat at the table, Lily's soft breathing the only sound in the empty house, and tried to make sense of James Winters. He'd saved her, spent a fortune on her, given her work and wages and a home, and now he was sleeping in the barn, avoiding her eyes, treating her like a business arrangement instead of a woman he'd rescued. Emma cleared the dishes, banked the fire, checked that the door was locked, though who she was locking out in the middle of nowhere she couldn't say, and retreated to the bedroom with Lily. The cradle sat by the bed, beautiful and heartbreaking. Emma laid Lily in it, watched her daughter sleep for a long moment. Then she changed into the nightgown Mrs. Henderson had given her, climbed under the quilt. The bed was soft. The room was warm. Lily was safe and fed and sleeping peacefully. By any measure, this was better than the boarding house in Timber Ridge, better than the courthouse floor, better than anything Emma had dared hope for yesterday morning. So why did she feel so unsettled? So uncertain, because kindness without explanation felt like a trap, because rescue without conditions felt too good to be true, because James Winters was an enigma she couldn't solve. And Emma had learned the hard way that men were dangerous when you couldn't predict them. She closed her eyes, tried to sleep. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window frames. The fire in the main room crackled and popped. And somewhere in the darkness, James Winters bedded down in the barn, alone in the cold. 3 days passed, the pattern held. James left at dawn with Ben and Sam. Emma kept the house, cooked meals, tended the chickens, tried to make herself useful. James returned at dusk, ate dinner in silence, then disappeared to the barn or the bunkhouse. They spoke only when necessary, practical words about supplies needed, work completed, the weather. But something was building between them, a tension that had nothing to do with fear or obligation, something Emma couldn't name. On the fourth morning, she woke to find fresh snow falling. Not a blizzard like the storm that had driven them to the Hendersons, but a steady, heavy fall that blanketed everything in white. She made coffee, cornmeal mush, expected James to come in for breakfast before riding out. But the door stayed closed. The house stayed quiet. Emma waited an hour, then two. Finally worried, she bundled Lily against her chest, pulled on James's sheepskin coat he'd never asked for back, and stepped outside. The cold bit at her face. The world was muffled by falling snow, everything soft and distant. Emma made her way to the barn, her boots sinking into drifts. Inside the barn was dim and warm, heated by the bodies of horses and the 2 milk cows James kept. Ben and Sam's voices came from the back stalls, speaking in low tones. Emma followed the sound, found them standing outside Buck's stall, looking worried. And inside the stall, James, his shirt soaked with sweat despite the cold, his face pale, leaning heavily against the horse, one hand pressed to his left side. James, Emma's voice came out sharper than she'd intended. He looked up, surprise, and something else crossed his face. Anger, maybe, or embarrassment. "I told you to stay in the house," he said. "You didn't come for breakfast. I was worried. What's wrong?" "Nothing, just pulled something yesterday. It's fine." He tried to straighten up, couldn't. Pain flashed across his face. Emma turned to Ben. "How long has he been like this?" Ben hesitated, glanced at James, then back to Emma. "Since yesterday afternoon, ma'am. He's been working through it, but it's getting worse." Emma's jaw set. She looked at James. "You're coming to the house, now." "Emma, I don't need to be mothered. I'm fine." "You can barely stand. You're not fine." "Ben, help him." Ben moved before James could protest, got under James's arm, started supporting him toward the barn door. Sam went ahead to open it. Emma followed. Lily pressed against her chest, watching as they half-carried James through the snow to the house. Inside, she pointed to the rocking chair by the fire. "Sit." James sat, his jaw tight with pain or pride or both. Emma handed Lily to Sam, who looked terrified but held the baby carefully. She turned back to James. "Shirt off." "That's not necessary. I just need to rest and it will be fine. You can take it off yourself or I can cut it off. Choose." James's eyes flashed, but he began unbuttoning his shirt, moving slowly, carefully. When he pulled it away, Emma's breath caught. His left side was a mass of purple and black bruising, spreading from his ribs to his hip. The skin was hot to the touch, swollen and angry. "What happened?" Emma demanded. "Got kicked," James said through gritted teeth. "One of the calves, day before yesterday. It's just bruising." "Just bruising." Emma knelt beside the chair. "You could have broken ribs, internal bleeding. What were you thinking working like this?" "Work doesn't stop because I'm sore. Work stops when you can't breathe without passing out." Emma looked up at Ben and Sam. "Get snow, clean snow in a basin, and fine cloth for compresses." The men hurried to obey. Emma turned back to James. His face was pale now, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold that had clung to him from outside. "This is stupid," she said quietly. "You're being stupid. I've been hurt worse. That doesn't make this smart." Emma's hands hovered over the bruising, afraid to touch it. "You should see a doctor. Nearest doctor is in Timber Ridge. That's a day's ride in this weather." "Then what do I do?" James met her eyes. For the first time since the Henderson cabin, his expression was unguarded. "You do what you're doing. Cold compresses to bring down the swelling. Make sure I keep breathing even. Watch for fever." He paused. "And you tell me if I'm being an idiot about this." "You're being an idiot about this." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Noted." Ben returned with a basin of clean snow and torn strips of cloth. Sam still held Lily, bouncing her awkwardly when she began to fuss. Emma took the supplies and began making cold compresses, laying them gently against James's injured side. He flinched but didn't pull away, just sat there in the rocking chair, eyes closed, breathing carefully through the pain. "You two go tend the animals," Emma said to Ben and Sam. "I'll stay with him." "Ma'am, if you need anything," Ben started. "I'll fire the shotgun. You will come running, I know." They left, pulling their hats low. The door closed behind them. Emma was alone with James and the baby. She changed the compresses every 20 minutes, kept the fire high, made strong coffee that James drank without complaint. He didn't try to get up, didn't try to go back to work, just sat in the rocking chair, eyes closed, breathing carefully. After an hour of silence, Emma spoke. Why didn't you tell me you were hurt? Didn't want you to worry. I'm your housekeeper. Part of keeping house is making sure the man who owns it doesn't kill himself being stubborn. James's eyes opened. That storm gray focused on her face. Is that all you are, my housekeeper? Emma's hands stilled on the compress. What else would I be? I don't know. I've been trying to figure that out for 4 days. The honesty in his voice surprised her. Emma sat back on her heels. You're the one who set the terms, $20 a month, room and board, domestic work. I know what I said, but it doesn't feel right. You're not staff, Emma. You're not an employee. Then what am I? He was quiet for a long time. Studying her face, when he spoke his voice was low. You're someone I'm trying not to fail. Emma didn't know what to say to that. She changed the compress, checked his breathing, tried to ignore the way her heart had started beating faster. What does that mean? James shifted in the chair, winced. It means I bought you at an auction, and that makes me responsible for you, and whether you like it or not. It means I promised you choices and safety, and I meant it, but it also means I don't know how to act around you, because everything I do feels wrong somehow. Wrong how? If I'm friendly, it feels like I'm expecting something from you. If I'm distant, it feels like I'm treating you like property. If I try to help, you push back. If I give you space, you think I regret bringing you here. He met her eyes. I can't win, Emma, so I've been trying to just do the work. Keep the ranch running. Give you time to figure out what you need, without me hovering. Emma stared at him. The words hit like stones, each one landing heavy. You could have just asked me what I needed. Could I? Because every time I try to talk to you, you look at me like I'm about to hurt you. Like I'm one wrong move away from turning into every other man who's failed you. The words were too close to truth. Emma stood abruptly, the compress falling from her hands. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. You don't know anything about me, about what I've been through. You're right, I don't. James leaned his head back against the chair, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. And you don't know anything about me either. We're two strangers trying to figure out how to live under the same roof without destroying each other. It's not easy for either of us. Emma wrapped her arms around herself. Lily had started fussing in the cradle, working up to a cry. Emma picked her up automatically, holding her daughter like a shield. I'm trying, she said quietly. I'm trying to trust you. But trust isn't something I have a lot left to give. I know, and I'm not asking for it. Not yet. I'm just asking you to stop waiting for me to become a monster. Because I'm not going to, Emma, no matter how long you wait. Emma looked at him. Really looked. At the pain in his face, the bruising on his side, the exhaustion in his eyes. At this man who'd spent a fortune to save her. Who'd ridden through a blizzard for a woman he didn't know. Who'd built a cradle in the middle of the night and filled drawers with space for clothes she didn't own. All right, she said, I'll try. That's all I'm asking. They settled into an uneasy truce after that. Emma kept the compresses coming. James drank the willow bark tea she brewed for pain. Lily nursed and dozed and woke again. The snow continued falling outside, soft and relentless. By evening, the swelling in James's side had gone down slightly. His color was better. He insisted on moving to the table for dinner, though Emma could see each movement cost him. You should sleep in the bed tonight, Emma said as they ate. I'll take the rocking chair. No, the bed is yours. I'm fine in the barn. You're injured. You need rest and warmth, not a frozen barn. I'll sleep by the fire then. Emma set down her fork. Why are you being stubborn about this? Because you need privacy. You need space that's yours alone. I won't take that from you. What I need is for you to stop treating me like I'm made of glass. I've survived worse than sharing a house with a man who has broken ribs. I can handle you sleeping by the fire. James studied her face. All right, but if you're uncomfortable at any point, you tell me. No arguments. Deal. That night, Emma helped James settle on a pallet by the fire. She brought him extra blankets, made sure the wood was stacked close enough that he could reach it without getting up. Lily was already asleep in the cradle in the bedroom, and Emma found herself reluctant to leave the main room. Emma, James said quietly. Yes, thank you for today, for taking care of me. You're paying me to keep house. That includes keeping you alive. Even so, thank you. Emma nodded, retreated to the bedroom. But she left the door open a crack, just enough that she could hear James's breathing, slow and even in the darkness. She lay awake for a long time, listening to the fire crackle, the wind howl outside, thinking about James's words, about trust and monsters and trying. Somewhere in the night, Lily woke crying. Emma stumbled from bed to soothe her. And when she emerged from the bedroom, she found James trying to sit up, his face creased with concern. Just the baby, Emma said quickly. Go back to sleep. But James was already up, moving slowly to the fire to add wood. I'm awake anyway. Bring her out here, it's warmer. So Emma sat in the rocking chair with Lily, and James tended the fire, and they spent an hour in the deep night together, not speaking, just existing in the same space. It wasn't comfort exactly, it wasn't peace, but it was something, a beginning maybe, a small crack in the walls they'd both built. And when Lily finally settled back to sleep and Emma returned to her bed, she realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Not of James, at least. Maybe that was enough for now. Maybe that was everything. 3 more days passed. James healed slowly, the bruising fading from black to purple to yellow-green. His breathing came easier. Emma watched him carefully, noting when he moved too quickly or when pain flashed across his face before he could hide it. She'd started trusting her instincts about him, and those instincts said he'd push himself too hard if she didn't intervene. You're hovering, James said one morning as Emma refilled his coffee for the 3rd time. I'm making sure you don't collapse and crack your skull open, Emma replied. That's different. Ben laughed from his seat at the table. He and Sam had taken to eating breakfast in the main house now, a shift that had happened naturally after James's injury. Emma didn't mind. Their presence made the house feel less isolated, less like she and James were tiptoeing around something neither could name. She's worse than my mother, Sam said to James. You should just give in now. Save yourself the trouble. Your mother was a smart woman, Emma said. She knew stubborn men need managing. Yes, ma'am, Sam grinned. That's what she always said. The easy banter felt good. Normal. Emma had forgotten what normal felt like. People gathered around a table, sharing a meal and conversation without tension crackling underneath. Lily seemed to sense it too. She'd started making happy noises from her cradle, responding to voices with coos and gurgles. Someone's awake, Ben said. He stood and peered into the bedroom where the cradle sat. Can I hold her, ma'am? Emma's first instinct was to say no, to keep Lily close and protected. But Ben's face held only gentle interest, and she remembered Mrs. Henderson's words about James being a good man. He'd chosen these two to work for him. That had to mean something. Support her head, Emma said, and sit down first. She's getting heavy. Ben settled into the rocking chair with Lily in his arms, his big hands surprisingly gentle. Sam moved to stand behind him, making faces at the baby until she smiled. She's beautiful, Ben said, like her mama. Emma felt her face heat. She turned away, busying herself with the dishes. When she glanced back, James was watching her, an expression she couldn't read on his face. The moment broke when someone knocked on the door. Everyone froze. Visitors were rare this far from town, especially in winter. James stood slowly, his hand moving automatically toward the rifle mounted above the fireplace. Ben, take the baby to the bedroom, he said quietly. Emma, go with him. James, Emma started. Just do it. Please. Something in his voice made Emma obey. She took Lily from Ben and hurried into the bedroom. Ben followed, positioned himself in the doorway, his body between Emma and the main room. Sam had moved to the window, peering out carefully. It's a wagon, Sam said. 2 horses, 1 driver. You recognize him, James asked. No boss, but he's alone. James relaxed slightly but didn't move away from the rifle. All right, I'll talk to him. You two stay ready. He opened the door. Cold air rushed in along with the man's voice. Mr. Winter's name's Richard Fletcher. I'm looking for Mrs. Emma Harrison. Heard she might be here. Emma's breath caught. Fletcher. Mrs. Fletcher from the courthouse. The laundress who tried to stop the auction. She pushed past Ben before he could stop her. Mr. Fletcher. She appeared in the doorway beside James. Is Mrs. Fletcher all right? The man on the porch was small and weathered, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. His face broke into a smile of relief when he saw Emma. "She's fine, Mrs. Harrison, worried about you, though. Sent me to check that you were safe." His eyes moved to James. "Mr. Winters, I presume?" "That's right," James said, his voice cautious. "You came 20 miles in this weather to check on Mrs. Harrison. My wife hasn't slept properly since the auction. She feels responsible, like she should have done more to stop it." Mr. Fletcher stamped his feet against the cold. "She made me promise to see with my own eyes that Mrs. Harrison and the baby were being treated well." Emma felt her throat tighten. Mrs. Fletcher, who barely had enough to feed her own children, had sent her husband through the snow out of guilt and concern. "Come in," Emma said. "Please, have some coffee." Mr. Fletcher entered, removing his hat. His eyes took in the warm house. The breakfast dishes still on the table. Ben and Sam standing protectively near the bedroom door. His gaze lingered on Emma, assessing. "You look better than you did at the courthouse," he said finally. "Less afraid, Os." "I am better," Emma said. "Mr. Winters has been kind enough to give me work and a safe place for Lily and me to stay." "He's not forcing you to say that," Mr. Fletcher looked at James. "No offense meant, sir, but my wife needs to know the truth." James nodded slowly. "Emma, do you want to talk to Mr. Fletcher privately?" The fact that he asked, that he gave her the choice, made Emma's answer easier. "No, there's nothing to hide. Mr. Winters bought me at auction to save me from worse fates. He's given me work and wages and treated me with respect. Your wife can rest easy." "You're sure?" Mr. Fletcher pressed. "Because if you need help, if you need a way out, my wife and I, we don't have much, but our door is open." "I don't need a way out," Emma said. The firmness in her own voice surprised her. "This is where I want to be, at least for now." Mr. Fletcher studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "All right then, I believe you." He turned to James. "My wife asked me to give you something, Mr. Winters. Payment, she called it, though she knows you don't need it." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small cloth bundle. When he unwrapped it, Emma saw bread, still warm, and a jar of preserved peaches. She said any man who'd spend his savings to stop that auction deserved thanks. And she wanted Mrs. Harrison to know she has friends in Timber Ridge. "If you ever need anything, our door is always open." Emma took the bundle with shaking hands. "Tell her thank you. Tell her I'll never forget what she tried to do." Mr. Fletcher smiled. "I will. She'll be glad to hear you're safe." He pulled his hat back on. "I should go. Got a long ride back." "Stay for breakfast at least," Emma said, "and take some supplies for your wife, please." They fed Mr. Fletcher, loaded his wagon with flour, salt pork, and dried beans. James insisted, ignoring Emma's protests about the cost. When the man finally left, promising to tell his wife everything he'd seen, Emma stood in the doorway, watching the wagon disappear into the trees. "That was kind of you," she said to James, "giving him those supplies. Mrs. Fletcher tried to help you when no one else would. Least I can do is make sure her family eats well this winter." Emma turned to look at him. "You're a strange man, James Winters. So you keep telling me. I mean it as a compliment." "I know." He smiled, a real smile this time. Not the careful half expression that he usually wore. "Come on, we've got work to do." But before they could move, Mr. Fletcher's wagon reappeared, coming fast. The older man's face was pale as he pulled up. "Mr. Winters, Mrs. Harrison, there's something else. Something I should have told you right away." He climbed down from the wagon, breathing hard. "There's a man in Timber Ridge, been there 3 days now, asking questions about you both, about the auction, about who bid." James's jaw tightened. "What kind of questions?" "About witnesses, about who was there, who saw what happened. He's building a case, trying to prove the sale was invalid somehow." Mr. Fletcher looked at Emma. "He's also been talking to Jake Morrison and Frank Cooper, the men who bid against you, Mr. Winters, offering them money to testify that you threatened them, that you forced them to stop bidding." "That's a lie," Emma said. "I know that. You know that. But Judge Blackwell will believe whatever this man pays him to believe." Mr. Fletcher's expression was grim. "His name is Clayton Webb. He's a creditor from Denver, and he's claiming that William Harrison owed him $300. Says he has a legal right to collect. that Mrs. Harrison is part of that debt. Emma felt ice flood her veins. James's face had gone very still, very cold. How much time do we have? Clayton's gathering in his witnesses today. He plans to bring them here tomorrow, along with the sheriff. He's going to claim you kidnapped Mrs. Harrison, that the auction was invalid, that she belongs to him as William Harrison's creditor. Mr. Fletcher looked at Emma. I'm sorry, my wife sent me as soon as we heard. We rode through the night. Thank you, Emma whispered. After Mr. Fletcher left, promising to send word if he learned anything else, the four of them stood in the yard. The morning sun suddenly felt cold. What do we do? Sam asked. James was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly racing. We need to know more about Clayton Webb, about his claim, about whether it's legitimate. He looked at Ben and Sam. You two ride to Denver today. Ask questions. Find out everything you can about this man and his business practices. Boss, that's a 3-day ride, Ben said. I know, but we need information, and we need it fast. Ben and Sam exchanged glances, then nodded. We'll leave within the hour. They disappeared into the bunkhouse to pack. James turned to Emma, his expression unreadable. I need you to stay here. Stay close to the house. Keep the rifle loaded. If anyone comes, anyone you don't recognize, you lock the door and don't open it. Understand? You think Clayton will come before tomorrow? I don't know, but I'm not taking chances. Emma nodded, her heart hammering. James reached out, almost touched her shoulder, then stopped. Let his hand fall. I won't let him take you, he said quietly. Whatever it costs. 2 hours later, Ben and Sam rode out, their saddlebags packed for the journey to Denver. Emma watched from the window as they disappeared over the ridge. The house felt empty without them. Too quiet. James spent the day checking fences that didn't need checking, chopping firewood they didn't need, working off tension and fear. Emma tried to keep busy, but her hands shook as she kneaded bread, as she mended clothes. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow outside the window made her heart race. That night they ate in silence, the tension thick between them. Tell me about Clayton Webb, Emma said finally. You knew his name when Sam described him. You've heard of him before. James set down his fork. He's a creditor, buys debts from other people at discount, then collects them at full price, plus interest, plus fees. He's ruthless, and he has connections, judges, sheriffs, politicians. And he thinks William Harrison owed him $300, apparently. But William died 3 months ago. Why is Clayton only showing up now? James's expression darkened. Because he didn't know about you until the auction. Someone must have told him about the widow and baby, about the sale, and he saw an opportunity. Emma felt sick. An opportunity for what? James looked at her, his eyes holding something she couldn't quite read. $300 is a lot of money, Emma, but a young woman, a woman with skills and no protections, she's worth more, much more, to the right buyer. The implication hung in the air. Emma's hands clenched into fists. He was going to sell me. Yes. But you bought me first. Yes. And now he wants his investment back. James nodded. Emma stood, walked to the window, stared out at the darkness, at the snow-covered landscape that had seemed so peaceful this morning, that now felt like a trap. What happens if he wins, if Judge Blackwell rules in his favor? He won't. But what if he does? James stood, moved to stand behind her, close but not touching. Then we fight it. We appeal. We find a better lawyer, a better judge. We do whatever it takes. And if that doesn't work, silence. Emma turned to face him. You didn't answer my question. Because I don't have a good answer. Because I won't let it get that far. You can't promise that. I know, but I'm promising it anyway. They stood there in the darkness, the fire casting shadows on the walls. Outside an owl called, hunting in the cold night. I should check on Lily, Emma said finally. Emma, she stopped. We're going to figure this out. Together. You're not alone in this. Emma wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that together was enough. But she'd been alone for so long, had learned to rely only on herself. It was hard to imagine any other way. Good night, James. Good night. She retreated to the bedroom, lay beside Lily in the darkness, and tried not to think about Clayton Webb. About being sold again, about losing everything that she had just begun to hope for. 3 days passed with no word from Ben and Sam, no appearance from Clayton or the sheriff, just waiting. The tension building like pressure before a storm. James barely left Emma Suantum. He worked close to the house where he could see the doors and windows, where he could hear if she called. The rifle was always close, loaded, ready. Emma tried to maintain normal routines, but everything felt fragile, temporary, like it could shatter at any moment. On the fourth morning, riders appeared on the northern ridge, 6 of them, moving in tight formation. James saw them first. He'd been hauling water from the well, dropped the buckets, ran for the house. Emma, get inside, take Lily, lock the door. Who is it? I don't know, but 6 men riding together is never good news. Emma wanted to argue, but the fear in James's eyes stopped her. She grabbed Lily, retreated into the house, locked the door, moved to the window where she could see without being easily seen. The riders reached the ranch. Emma's stomach dropped. She recognized one of them. The thin stranger from the auction, the one who'd bid for Clayton Webb. The lead rider was tall and broad, thick beard going gray, expensive coat, cold eyes. This had to be Clayton Webb himself. Beside him rode Sheriff Coleman, looking uncomfortable but resolute. Behind them, 4 rough-looking men, including Jake Morrison from the Silver Bell Saloon. James stood in the yard, alone, waiting, his hand resting easy near his revolver. Clayton dismounted with a smile that made Emma's skin crawl. "Winters," he called, his voice carrying clearly in the cold air. "Time's up. You got my money, or should I take what I came for?" "I have your money." James pulled a leather pouch from his coat, tossed it to the ground at Clayton's feet. $300, what William Harrison owed you, according to your fraudulent claim." Clayton picked up the pouch slowly, his eyes never leaving James's face. He counted the money twice, then looked at the sheriff. "It's 300, but that doesn't change anything. I still have legal claim to the woman." "Your claim is void," James said, his voice hard. "Mrs. Harrison isn't available to be claimed." "And why is that?" James pulled a paper from his pocket, unfolded it carefully. "Because she's my wife now, legally married, 3 nights ago, signed by Reverend Douglas, witnessed by Benjamin Carter and Samuel Carter. Completely legal." Emma's breath stopped. Wife. They weren't married. What was he doing? Sheriff Coleman took the certificate, examined it. His weathered face showed nothing. But Emma saw his jaw tighten. "It's legitimate," the sheriff said finally. "Married women can't be claimed for their late husband's family debts. She's Winter's responsibility now. Not Harrison's estate." Clayton's face went purple with rage. "That's convenient. Real convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" "The timing doesn't matter," James said. "The law is clear. Emma is my wife. You have no claim on her." "This is fraud," Clayton snarled. "You married her to cheat me out of what I'm owed. I married her because I wanted to, because she wanted to. Our reasons are our own." James's voice dropped, went cold. "Now take your money and get off my property." Clayton's hand twitched toward his gun. For one terrible moment, Emma thought he'd draw. That blood would be spilled here in the snow. But Jake Morrison spoke from behind Clayton. "It's true, Sheriff. At the auction, Winters threatened me, put his hands on me, said he'd make me spit teeth if I kept bidding. I was afraid for my life." "That's because you called my wife names I won't repeat," James said, his eyes cutting to Jake. "And I'd do it again." Frank Cooper stepped forward. He had that rifle. "We were all scared. The auction was under duress." "Under duress," James's voice dripped contempt. "You bid up to $110 on your own. No one forced you." "Enough," Sheriff Coleman said, his voice cutting through the argument. "Webb, you got your money. The debt's satisfied. The marriage is legal. You've got no claim here." Clayton rounded on the sheriff. "You know what she's worth, a woman like that, young and healthy, with a baby. I could have made 10 times what Harrison owed me." The casual cruelty of the words made Emma gasp, even through the window, even knowing Clayton saw her as property. Hearing it spoken so plainly still shocked her. The door flew open. Emma stood there, Lily in her arms, unable to stay hidden anymore. "Get off this ranch," she said, her voice cut through the cold air like a knife. "You have your money. You have no legal claim. You're trespassing now." Clayton turned to stare at her, his eyes crawling over her in a way that made her stomach turn. You think you're safe now? Think marrying Winters protects you? I know what you did to that woman last year, the one who disappeared after you claimed her for debt. I know the territorial marshal is asking questions about you. You come near me or my daughter again, and I'll make sure he hears every detail. I'll testify. I'll bring witnesses. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are. Clayton's face went white. You don't know anything. Try me. They stared at each other across the snowy yard. Emma felt power flowing through her. Real power. Not the desperate strength of survival, but the solid confidence of someone who knew her ground. She was married to James Winters now. She had a home, witnesses, the law on her side. She wasn't property anymore. Clayton must have seen it in her face, because he took a step back. This isn't over, he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Yes, it is, Sheriff Coleman said, his voice quiet but firm. Webb, you got your money. Mrs. Winters made herself clear. You stay away from this ranch and these people, or I'll arrest you for harassment. He paused, and Emma heard something in his voice, something unexpected. I've been getting letters from Denver, questions about your business practices, questions about women who've gone missing after you've claimed them. I've been ignoring those letters, because we both know why. Clayton's eyes widened. Coleman, you are making a mistake. Maybe, but I'm not making a bigger one by helping you kidnap a married woman in front of witnesses. The sheriff's voice hardened. You stay away from the Winters, both of them, or I'll arrest you myself, then we'll let the territorial marshal sort it out. Clayton's jaw worked, but he had no response. He grabbed the money pouch, mounted his horse with vicious jerks on the reins. His men followed, clearly relieved to be leaving. They rode out fast, snow kicking up behind them. But before they disappeared over the ridge, Clayton turned back, looked directly at Emma, and she saw promise in his eyes. This wasn't over. Not for him. Then they were gone. Sheriff Coleman remained. He looked at James, then at Emma, then at the marriage certificate still in his hand. This is legitimate, he said. But it was also rushed. You sure about this, ma'am? About marrying a man you barely know? I'm sure, Emma said, moving to stand beside James. Because if you're being coerced in any way, I can help. I'm not being coerced, Emma's voice was firm. I married him freely, by my own choice, and I'd do it again. The sheriff studied her face, then nodded, handed the certificate back to James. All right then, congratulations on your marriage. Mr. Winters, you take care of them. Mrs. Winters, if you ever need help, my door's open. He touched his hat brim and rode away. Emma and James stood in the yard, alone. The morning sun suddenly bright after the confrontation. We're not married, Emma said quietly. James looked down at the certificate in his hands. No, we're not. That was a fake. I had to try something to scare him off. It didn't work. No, he'll be back. They stood in silence, the weight of what had just happened settling over them. What do we do now? Emma asked. James folded the fake certificate carefully, put it in his pocket. We get married for real this time. Tonight if possible, before Clayton can challenge it. Emma stared at him. You want to marry me? Actually marry me. I want you safe. And right now, marriage is the only legal protection that might work. He met her eyes. But I won't force you. It has to be your choice. Emma looked at him, at this man who'd spent his savings to save her, who'd fought Clayton Webb, who was offering her the only protection he could think of. What if I say no? Then we fight Clayton another way. But Emma, I need you to understand something. If Clayton comes back with a better lawyer, if he finds a way to invalidate that first auction, you could lose everything. They could take Lily away, send you somewhere horrible. I can't let that happen. So you'd marry me to prevent it? Yes. Even though we barely know each other? Yes. Even though I might be a terrible wife? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I'll take my chances. Emma looked down at Lily sleeping in her arms, at her daughter who deserved a father, a home, safety. Then she looked at James, really looked at him, at the determination in his face, the fear he was trying to hide, the kindness he'd shown her from the first moment. "All right," she said, "let's get married." The afternoon sun was already dipping behind the mountains when James rode to the Fletcher place. Emma watched him go from the window, Lily sleeping in her arms. He'd promised to return before dark, with Reverend Douglas if the old man would come, with a plan if he wouldn't. Emma should have felt afraid, should have felt trapped. Instead, she felt strangely calm, as if some decision deep inside her had already been made, long before Clayton Webb appeared, long before James showed that fake certificate. Maybe as far back as that moment in the Henderson cabin when she'd overheard him promise her choices. She'd made her choice now. She was choosing James Winters, choosing this life, choosing to fight. The door opened. Emma spun around. But it was only Ben and Sam, back from Denver 3 days early, their faces grim, their horses lathered with sweat. "Mrs. Harrison," Ben said, then stopped, corrected himself. "Sorry, Mrs. Winters. We heard in town. Congratulations." "We're not married yet," Emma said. "That certificate Clayton saw was fake. James went to get Reverend Douglas to make it real." Sam's eyes widened, but Ben just nodded, as if he'd suspected as much. "We learned things in Denver," Ben said, "about Clayton Webb, things you need to know." Emma set Lily in her cradle, poured coffee for the brothers. They sat at the table, hands wrapped around the warm cups, looking older than they had 4 days ago. "Clayton Webb is wanted," Ben said. "Not officially, but the territorial marshal has been asking questions about his business practices, about women who've disappeared after he claimed them." "How many women?" Emma asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "At least 3 that they can prove. Probably more." Sam leaned forward. "There was a woman last year named Margaret Thorne, widow with 2 children. Her husband died owing Clayton money. Clayton claimed her to work off the debt. She disappeared 2 months later. The children, too. No bodies ever found. But everyone knows." Emma felt cold flood through her. "Does Sheriff Coleman know?" "He knows. But Clayton pays well for silence. And without proof, without witnesses willing to testify, there's nothing the marshal can do." "Until now," Ben said, his voice grim. "We told the marshal about you, about the auction, about Clayton's claim he's investigating. But these things take time." "How much time?" Emma asked. Ben and Sam exchanged glances. "Weeks, maybe months. Legal process moves slow." "We don't have weeks," Emma said. "Clayton will come back. Soon. He won't just walk away from this." "We know," Ben said. "That's why we rode hard. To warn you, to help you prepare." The door opened again. James entered with Reverend Douglas behind him. The old preacher looked exhausted, wrapped in heavy furs, but his eyes were sharp and clear. "Mr. Carter, Mr. Carter," he nodded to Ben and Sam. "Good to see you boys. Heard you've been doing some investigating." "Yes, sir." "Good. We'll need every bit of evidence we can get." Reverend Douglas turned to Emma, studied her face with the kind of gaze that saw past surfaces, past fears, down to the truth underneath. "Miss Emma Harrison, soon to be Mrs. Winters, are you certain about this marriage? Are you entering freely, without coercion?" Emma met his gaze steadily. "I am certain, Reverend. I'm choosing this, choosing him, even knowing it's partly for protection, partly for legal reasons. Even knowing that." The Reverend smiled, a small, sad smile. "Sometimes the best marriages start with practical reasons and grow into something more. I've seen it happen, more often than you'd think." He moved to stand before the fireplace, opened his worn Bible. "Then let's not waste time. If Clayton Webb is who you say he is, every hour matters." Emma looked at James. He stood by the door, still in his coat, snow melting on his shoulders. His eyes held a question, a last chance to back out. She shook her head, moved to stand beside him. "I'm ready." Ben and Sam positioned themselves as witnesses. Reverend Douglas began to speak. The words were familiar. The same vows Emma had spoken once before to Robert. But they felt different now. Heavier, more real. "Do you, James Winters, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish till death do you part?" James's voice was steady, strong. "I do." Do you, Emma Harrison, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do you part? Emma thought about Robert, about the life they'd planned that never came to be, about standing on an auction block, about James riding through a blizzard to save her, about the cradle he'd built in the darkness, about the way he'd stood between her and Clayton Webb without hesitation. I do. James reached into his pocket, pulled out a ring, simple gold, worn and tarnished but clearly precious. It was Martha's, he said quietly, my stepmother. She gave it to me before she died, made me promise I'd give it to someone who deserved it. He slid it onto Emma's finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. The gold was warm against her skin. By the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Reverend Douglas smiled. You may kiss the bride. James hesitated. This would be their first real kiss, the seal on their marriage, the beginning of everything. Emma lifted her face to his, waited. The kiss was gentle, brief, more promise than passion. But when James pulled back, his eyes held something Emma had never seen before, something like wonder. Hello, wife, he whispered. Hello, husband. Ben and Sam clapped them both on the back, grinning despite the circumstances, despite the danger waiting outside. Congratulations, Ben said. Boss, you're a lucky man. I know it. They signed the certificate by firelight. James's signature bold and clear, Emma's shaking slightly but legible. Ben and Sam signed as witnesses. Then Reverend Douglas added his name with a flourish. Keep this safe, he said, handing the paper to James. I suspect you'll need it soon. Thank you, Reverend, both for coming out here and for your discretion. Just doing God's work, son. The old man pulled his furs back on. And for what it's worth, I think you two will be good together. I've seen enough marriages to know when one has a chance. This one does. After he left, the four of them stood in the suddenly quiet house. Husband and wife, two loyal hands, a family of sorts, bound together against what was coming. We need to prepare, James said. Clayton won't wait long. He's desperate now. Desperate men do stupid things. What do we do? Emma asked. James moved to the gun cabinet, started pulling out rifles, checking ammunition. We fortify, board the windows, stock supplies inside. Make sure we can defend this place if we have to. He looked at Emma. And I'm going to teach you to shoot. Properly. So you can defend yourself and Lily if something happens to me. Emma wanted to protest, but she knew he was right. She nodded. All right, teach me. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Ben and Sam reinforced the doors, boarded the lower windows, moved food and water inside, checked and rechecked the ammunition supply. James took Emma to the fence line behind the barn, away from the house, where gunfire wouldn't scare Lily. He showed her how to hold the Winchester rifle, how to load it, how to sight down the barrel, how to breathe and squeeze the trigger instead of jerking it. The first shot kicked hard into Emma's shoulder, made her stumble back. But James was there, steadying her. You're tensing up, anticipating the kick. Don't fight it. Let it happen. Emma tried again, and again. By the end of the first afternoon, her shoulder was bruised. Her ears were ringing, but she could hit a fence post at 50 yards. Not every time, but often enough. You're a natural, James said, surprise and pride mixing in his voice. I grew up on a farm. My father taught me to shoot rabbits. This is just a bigger gun. Can you shoot a man? The question hung between them. Heavy, real. Emma thought about Clayton Webb, about his cold eyes, about the women who'd disappeared, about Lily sleeping safe in her cradle. If I have to, yes, I can. James nodded, satisfied. That night, they ate dinner together, the four of them. Emma had made stew from salt pork and dried vegetables. Not fancy, but hot and filling. They ate in silence mostly, each lost in their own thoughts. When Ben and Sam finally left for the bunkhouse, Emma and James were alone. Truly married now, the ring on her finger proof of it. I should check the animals, James said, standing from the table. You checked them an hour ago. I'll check them again. Emma stood too, moved to block his path to the door. James, we're married now. You don't have to sleep in the barn anymore. Or even by the fire. His jaw worked. That tell he had when he was uncomfortable. Emma, I don't want you to feel pressured. Just because we're legally married doesn't mean we have to be married in all ways. Not until you're ready. Emma reached up, touched his face. The first time she'd initiated contact like this. I'm not saying I'm ready for everything, but I'm ready for you to stop sleeping in the cold. Come to bed. Please, we'll figure out the rest as we go. James covered her hand with his, turned his face into her palm. All right, if you're sure. I'm sure. That night, they lay side by side in the bed, a careful distance between them, both staring at the ceiling in the darkness. Not touching, barely breathing, the tension thick enough to cut. But sometime in the night, Emma turned in her sleep, seeking warmth. She woke to find her head on James's shoulder, his arm around her, his breath stirring her hair. She should have pulled away, should have put the distance back. Instead, she stayed, let herself feel safe for just this moment, before whatever came next. The attack came 3 nights later. Emma woke to the smell of smoke. Acrid, wrong. She sat up. James was already moving, pulling on his pants, grabbing his gun. Stay here, he said. Lock the door behind me. He was gone before she could protest. Emma ran to the window, looked out. Her heart stopped. The barn was on fire, fully engulfed, flames licking 30 feet into the night sky, orange and red against the black. The horses were screaming, terrified. James, Ben, and Sam were running toward it, trying to save the animals, to save what they could. Emma dressed quickly, wrapped Lily in blankets. The baby was crying now, scared by the noise, by the smoke drifting through the cracks in the boards. Through the window, Emma watched them get the horses out. The 2 milk cows, gear, and tack. But the barn itself was beyond saving. It collapsed in a shower of sparks, the sound like thunder. When the men came back, their faces were black with soot, their eyes haunted. James found a note nailed to the fence post, the paper singed at the edges, the writing crude. You took what was mine. Now I take what is yours. It was signed with 2 letters. C.W. Clayton Webb. He's declaring war, Ben said, his voice grim. Then we give him one, James replied. They spent the rest of the night fortifying the house, moving everything valuable inside. The animals into a makeshift pen near the bunkhouse, away from the smoldering ruins of the barn. At dawn, they saw riders on the ridge to the south. 6 men, watching, waiting. He's going to attack, Sam said. Soon. Let him come, James said. He checked his rifle, made sure it was loaded. This is our land. We defend it. Emma stood at the window, Lily in her arms, watching those distant figures, knowing one of them was Clayton Webb, knowing he wanted her, would do anything to get her. I should leave, she said quietly. Take Lily and go, before anyone gets killed over me. James turned, his face hard. You're not going anywhere. This is your home now, our home. We stand together. James, he's going to kill you, all of you, just to get to me. Then we kill him first. The bluntness of it shocked her. James had always been so controlled, so measured. Now she saw the rage underneath, the determination. I won't let him take you, James continued, his voice dropping low, fierce. I don't care what it costs. You're my wife. This is your home, and no one takes what's mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have scared her, should have reminded her of being property, being owned. Instead, it made her feel protected, valued, chosen. All right, she said. We stand. The siege began at noon. Clayton and his men surrounded the house, called for Emma to come out, threatened to burn the house like they'd burned the barn. James fired a warning shot. Over their heads, the message clear. Come closer and the next one won't miss. For hours they stayed like that. Stalemate. Clayton's men circling, looking for weaknesses, finding none. The house was solid, well defended, and the 3 men inside knew how to shoot. But as night fell, the situation changed. Clayton's men started shooting. At the windows, at the doors, bullets punching through the boards, thudding into walls. Emma crouched in the bedroom with Lily. The baby was screaming, terrified. Emma held her close, sang to her. Nonsense words that meant nothing except Mama's here. Mama won't let them hurt you. A window shattered, glass spraying, a man climbing through. Emma didn't hesitate. She grabbed the rifle James had taught her to use, aimed, fired. The man fell back with a cry, disappearing into the darkness. Emma stared at the rifle in her hands. She'd done it. She'd protected her daughter, done what she had to do. The shooting intensified. Ben took a bullet through the shoulder. Sam bound it quickly, but the young man's face was pale, his left arm useless now. They were running out of ammunition, out of time. Clayton had more men, more guns, more resources. And then they heard it. Hoofbeats, many horses, and coming fast from the north. "That'll be more of his men," Sam said, his voice hopeless. But James was at the window, looking out, his face changing, relief flooding through him. "No, look at the badges." Emma moved to see, through the gap in the boards. Riders were pouring into the yard. A dozen of them, wearing U.S. Marshal badges, led by a tall man with a gray beard. "Clayton Webb," the lead marshal's voice carried, loud and clear. "You're surrounded. Drop your weapons." For one moment, Clayton seemed to consider fighting, his hand moving toward his gun. Then he saw how badly he was outnumbered, how trapped he was. He dropped his weapon. His men did the same. The marshal and his deputies moved in, efficient, professional, binding wrists, reading charges. "Clayton Webb, you're under arrest for arson, attempted kidnapping, assault with intent to kill, and we're reopening the investigation into the disappearance of Margaret Thorne and her children." Clayton's face went white. "You can't prove anything about Margaret." "Maybe not, but we can prove what you did here tonight, and that's enough to put you away for a long time." The marshal looked toward the house. James opened the door, stepped out. Emma followed, still holding Lily, still shaking with adrenaline and fear. "Mr. and Mrs. Winters," the marshal said, tipping his hat. "I'm Marshal Richard Hayes, Territorial Marshal out of Denver. We got word from Benjamin Carter and Samuel Carter about your situation. Rode hard to get here." He glanced at the smoldering barn, the bullet holes in the house. "Looks like we almost didn't make it in time." "You made it," James said, his voice rough. "That's what matters." Marshal Hayes looked at Emma. "Mrs. Winters, I'll need your statement about the auction, about Clayton's claims, about everything that happened here." Emma nodded, found her voice. "He tried to burn us out. He shot at our home. He would have killed us to get what he wanted." "What did he want?" "Me. He wanted to own me, to sell me, like I was livestock." The marshal's jaw tightened. "Clayton Webb will spend the rest of his life in territorial prison. You have my word on that, ma'am." They hauled Clayton away, still screaming about his rights, about Judge Blackwell, about how the law was on his side. But no one listened. No one cared. When the last horse had disappeared over the ridge, Emma's legs gave out. She sat heavily on the porch steps. Lily clutched tight. James sat beside her, close but not touching. "It's over," she whispered. "Yes. We're safe." "Yes." Emma started to cry, not from fear, not from relief, but from the weight of everything that had happened, everything she'd survived. She turned into James's shoulder and let the tears come. He held her, one arm around her shoulders, the other hand gentle on her hair, not speaking, just there, solid, real, safe. When the tears finally stopped, Emma pulled back, looked at him, at this man who'd saved her, who'd married her, who'd stood between her and Clayton Webb without hesitation. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For keeping your promise, for keeping us safe." James cupped her face in his hand, his thumb brushing away the last tear. "I'll always keep you safe. You're my wife, my family. Nothing will ever change that." "I know." And she did know. Finally, completely. She trusted him, trusted this, trusted that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real here. 2 months passed. Spring came to the mountains. The snow melted. Green shoots pushed through mud. The cattle had calves. The chickens laid eggs. Life continued. The new barn went up quickly. The whole community helped. The Fletchers, the Hendersons, even Reverend Douglas swung a hammer. They worked in shifts, sunrise to sunset, and within 2 weeks the frame stood tall. The roof on, the walls tight. James worked harder than anyone, trying to repay the kindness, trying to rebuild what Clayton had destroyed. Emma watched him from the porch one afternoon. Lily on her hip. The baby was nearly 6 months old now, sitting up, smiling at everyone, growing strong and healthy in the mountain air. And Emma realized something. She was late, 2 weeks late, maybe more. She'd been so busy, so focused on rebuilding, on healing, on learning how to be a wife to James that she hadn't noticed. But now she did, and with the noticing came certainty. She was pregnant. She told James that evening, after Ben and Sam had gone to the bunkhouse, after Lily was asleep. They sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "I'm carrying your child." James's hands went still on the rope he'd been mending. He looked at her, his eyes wide. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "How do you feel about it?" Always his first question. Not how he felt, but how she felt. Emma smiled. "Scared. I almost died having Lily. Robert's mother died in childbirth. I know the risks. We'll get you the best doctor. I'll take you to Denver if I have to." "James." She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. "I'm scared, but I'm also happy. I want this baby. I want our baby." His face broke into a smile, bright as sunrise, full of joy. "Our baby," he repeated. "Emma, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." He pulled her close, kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips, soft and sweet and full of promise. "Thank you," he whispered, "for this, for everything. Thank you for being the kind of man worth having babies with." They sat there as the sun disappeared, as stars emerged, as the night wrapped around them, planning, dreaming, building a future in words and hopes. The baby came in January, almost exactly a year after the auction. It was a long labor, hard. Emma screamed and cried and begged for it to end. But when the baby finally came, when Mrs. Fletcher placed him in Emma's arms, tiny and red-faced and perfect, all the pain vanished. "A son," James said, his voice thick with emotion. "We have a son. What should we name him?" James was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Robert," he said finally, "after your first husband. He should know about the man who came before, who gave you Lily." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "And Joseph, for your father. Robert Joseph Winters." Perfect. They had more children after that. Martha came 2 years later, named for James's stepmother, then another boy, another girl. The house that had seemed so empty now rang with children's voices, with laughter and arguments and life. Ben Carter married a girl from Timber Ridge, built a house on the north edge of the property. Sam followed suit a year later. The ranch grew, prospered, became something more than just land and cattle, became a family, a legacy. Years passed. Lily grew tall and strong, fearless and kind. She learned to ride before she could read, could shoot as well as any man. She married at 20, to a good man who loved her fierceness. Robert followed his mother's gift with numbers, became a bookkeeper, then a banker, moved to Denver but came home often, with his own children. With stories of the city, Martha stayed close, helped run the ranch, married late, to a man who understood she'd never be content just keeping house, who loved her for her strength instead of despite it. Emma and James grew old together, silver threading through their hair, lines deepening around their eyes. But the love between them only strengthened. What had started as necessity, as protection, had grown into something profound, something that sustained them through loss and moan and everything between. When James was 70, a stroke took his left side, made him slow, made him need help with things he'd done easily all his life. Emma cared for him without complaint, bathed him, dressed him, fed him when his hands shook too much, loved him through the indignity of age. "I'm sorry," he said one night, his speech slurred but understandable, "that you have to see me like this." "Hush," Emma said, brushing his silver hair back. "You cared for me when I had nothing. When I was property being sold. This is nothing. This is everything. This is marriage." He died in 1924, peacefully, in their bed, with Emma holding his hand. His last words were her name. Emma followed him less than a year later, as if she'd only been waiting to make sure he arrived safely, to make sure he'd be there waiting when she came. They buried her beside him. Under the cottonwood tree James had planted their first spring, where the mountains met the sky, where the wind sang through the grass, and the ranch continued through their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. A legacy built on one man's decision to ride through a blizzard, to bid at an auction, to save a woman he'd never met. The autumn sun fell golden across Winter's ranch. The old man in the rocking chair finished his story. His great-grandson sat silent beside him, processing everything he'd heard. "So, great-grandma was really sold at auction?" Henry asked finally. "For $15. Less than a horse." Thomas Winters looked at the photograph in Henry's hands, at the young woman who'd become his mother, at the tall man who'd saved her, who'd loved her, who'd built everything they now had. "But great-grandpa paid $150. He did, half his savings, to save a stranger." "Why?" Thomas smiled, the same storm-gray eyes his father had passed down. "Because he knew what it meant to lose everything, to be powerless, and he swore he'd never let it happen to another woman if he could prevent it." He reached out, touched the photograph. He saved her, but she saved him right back, gave him a family, a purpose, a reason to build something that would last. Did they love each other, really love each other? Not at first. At first it was just survival, protection, necessity. But love grew, day by day, choice by choice, until they couldn't imagine life without each other. Henry looked out at the ranch, at the house his great-grandparents had built, at the land they'd worked, at the legacy they'd left. "I wish I could have known them." "You do know them. They're in everything you see, everything we are." Thomas stood, old bones creaking, but his spine still straight, his mind still sharp. "Come on, your grandmother will have dinner ready, and if we're late, she'll give us that look." Henry laughed, followed his great-grandfather inside, the photograph carefully tucked into his pocket, a piece of history, a reminder of where they'd come from. As the sun set behind the mountains, as shadows stretched across the valley as another day ended, at the Winters Ranch, the legacy continued. Built on honor, redeemed by choice, sustained by love that grew from the smallest seed into something that would last forever. Because that's what real love does. It starts where it must, in desperation or duty or simple human kindness. But if you tend it, if you choose it every day, if you let it grow, it becomes something more. Something that transcends the circumstances that created it. Something that builds families and ranches and stories worth telling 50 years later. Emma Harrison had been sold at auction for $15. James Winters had paid $150 to save her. But what they'd built together was priceless, worth more than all the money in the world. A home, a family, a legacy, a love story that would be told for generations. And in the end, that was everything.